This is the series where we
we are live. I am Cory Kerr.
And I'm Joshua Kemble. And this is the series where we review the best of indie comics and other media like movies, TV, cartoons, books, and did we mention comics? So the idea that we have here is that we're kind of pulling back the curtain on our inspiration as artists. And we're going to be trying to kind of tackle a different book every week. So this week's book is Cory Kerr's pick, and then next week will be mine. And then we'll talk more about this at the end of the show. But since we conveniently are the IRS, you can go to irsagency.com and check out more information on how you could also submit like your own suggestions for the lists, get in contact with the show and subscribe and all that fun stuff. So this is going to be a community-based thing too.
You'll also see the books that the books, movies, and TV shows that we're going to be talking about. We'll have it on the schedule. And so if you want to read along with us, if you want to submit user comments, we'd love to pull up what you guys are talking about, what you guys are doing with what we're talking about on the air. So there's instructions on how to do that on that page as well.
Sweet.
Cool.
So Cory, before we get into the meat of the show, we got plugs to get out of the way. We're both creators. We both make art and make other things. So where do we want people to head, after they've checked out these fine reviews? And of course, like if we liked the books, picked up those books, where should people check out your work, Cory?
So you can check out my stuff all the time at corykerr.com. And if you go to corykerr.com/online, that'll show you links to YouTube and Twitch and Instagram and Twitter and all that jazz. But specifically, go watch some of my cartoons. I've got those under the animations link. And I've got the Endo Exo, episode 1 is up and those type of things. So go check it out. I love it.
That's exciting. And then for me, as usual, if you guys are familiar with my stuff, check out my stuff at joshuakemble.com. Quarterlystories.com will take you to the most recent graphic novel that I published, 2 stories. And then if you can, go to amazon.com and look at that. I kind of made that work slightly. Check out 2 stories, that book right there. That's going to be our story cam that we're going to be using to review books on my end. Cory has his own setup as well. But anyhow, go to Amazon and buy 2 stories. Go to 2 stories and buy Amazon. It's a graphic novel about faith and mental illness, hand-lettered, hand-inked, and 125 pages. And we got the plugs out of the way. Should we get into the meat of the show?
Sure. So since this is episode 1, what we're going to do is we do have a structure, and that structure is going to be that we're going to talk about the characters and the plot. We'll talk about what we think the meaning might be, what some of the themes are, and then what we're going to steal from it, what we took away from it, how it inspired us, and then I guess whoever's not presenting is just going to interrupt whenever they want. I don't know how that's going to work, so we'll see how it goes.
The main idea is if it's a book we both read that we liked, we're going to try to convince you, the viewer, to go check it out or potentially like buy it. If it's like a book, like in this case, it's a book I have not read and Cory has read. Cory's going to run through it, and then I, as the interested buyer, am going to be asking a lot of questions if there's anything that doesn't, line up or any curiosity as I have. So, and then of course in the chats, you guys can ask Cory questions as well. And while he's flipping through the books, I'll field those questions to him. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to take our names off. And you know that moment when Dorothy steps through the door and it goes to color?
Whoa!
We have
color. I love it. Great. So here's Limbo. And why don't you tell us about this book and why you picked it? I guess first, maybe you're telling us about the characters in the story, right?
Yeah. So first off, this book is by Waters and Wijngaard. So we've got, can you see everything okay there?
Oh, we got to get the color in there. We're still in black and white. It's a beautiful color book. So we're going to pump it with color. There we go. Dorothy's landscape. Love it.
Punch list of all the things we need to do. So we've got Caspar Wijngaard is the artist illustrator who does pencils, inks, and colors.
Oh wow!
And then Dan Waters wrote it. And we got Jim Campbell lettering. And opening page gives us our main character. This is Clay. He's a man with no memories. He wakes up about 9 months ago and has no idea what's going on. His memories have been completely erased. And somehow he kind of turns into kind of like a PI, like a private investigator. And he's really using this as trying to figure out like what's going on with him.
Okay.
And then this is also where we're introduced to the fishmen. There are these fishmen that kind of go through, and they're kind of mutated, sort of humanoid, sort of fish, and they're kind of like a hillbilly type of thing. So, kind of as we go through, I guess we'll do characters still. So we're still kind of cutting through, and we see different things. I'll come back to some of this stuff. This is Sandy, who is a voodoo queen necromancer who conjures the voodoo gods and spirits by dancing to 80s music. And so you can see that she'll like throw like a cassette tape down, and then she puts on like a mixtape, and that's how she's able to kind of cross over, and the cassette tape will start to like turn into, one of the voodoo gods. Then later on we meet the Thumb. And the Thumb is a drug-running crime boss luchador. And so he's right here, and he basically owns all the nightclubs. He's in charge of, he's kind of the kingpin of this area. And he's also a luchador that he has a flair for the dramatic. And so when he kills somebody, he doesn't just shoot him. He likes to, have them wrestle mutated alligators, and everybody bet on it and things like that.
I want to just chime in at this point and just say, so far, like first impressions, I'm really stunned by the, it sort of starts in what feels like kind of our world, and very quickly kind of introduces these fantastical characters and sort of builds its own universe. And that to me is really striking so far, where it seems like a fairly unique fantasy landscape kind of thing going on. And I just wanted to kind of mention that. That's pretty cool to just see. Makes me interested.
The cast of characters is pretty crazy. And the world is pretty crazy, but it seems to operate with some kind of specific rules and things. But it's not set in any particular time period or anything. So yeah, they do a really interesting job, because I'm only a few pages in.
Yeah.
And we've already got what's happening is this character. This is Miss Bridget, and Miss Bridget is a lounge singer, kind of janitor turned lounge singer that saw something she shouldn't have seen. So she goes through and she talks about she heard a TV on, and so she walks up to turn it off, and then she sees a room full of people staring at the TV, and this guy, the teleshaman, who is a shaman that has adapted to the modern age and found power not from nature but from television static. And he is dancing to the static, and then the goat gets kind of like sucked into the TV, and then everybody in the room sees her and turns and catches her. So she hires Clay to basically kind of protect her. Anyway, so there's that, and then we also have Papa Legba, who's the trickster god of the voodoo land beneath the sea, and he kind of plays a part later on. And those are really the main characters, kind of in this comic. So that's kind of the character breakdown. Cool.
So should we get into the plot then?
Yeah. So as far as plot goes, here we go. I wrote this, and those that have read the description of this video, I'll just read this because I feel like it's really hard to describe. Yeah. It's a reality-bending existential modern take on Sisyphus, set in a neon-noir hard-boiled detective story mixed with 80s technology, examining the blurred lines between media and reality. And it also dives into a lot of existential themes, which we'll get into kind of in the themes later.
I love it.
And I would say that it's kind of in between PG-13 and R as far as some of the content goes. So there's some implied nudity and quite a bit of swearing. So But that's kind of that. And so the basic plot is we start up here in Clay's favorite place, which serves amazing lizard on a stick, and that lizard on a stick becomes a theme as he goes and fights alligators, and then realizes that he's being manipulated, and so that's kind of the opening and closing kind of bookends of the story, is this lizard on a stick. But it's also, this yellow background and this purple lizard with a green hand. It sets it like, and then everywhere you're looking, you're seeing this neon.
Yeah.
So even though that this is like a dive bar and it's really darkly lit, we still have like a palm tree over here that's giving us kind of that old school 80s horror lighting where it was like, you'd have green versus purple, or, that.
Yeah. Who's the colorist on this? I'm sorry. I'm just curious.
Yeah. So Caspar Wijngaard does all the pencils, inks, and colors.
Nice. I just love the interplay of all the complementary colors that are going on there. It's pretty rad.
Yeah. And that's kind of throughout. There are a couple places where it gets really dark, but for the most part, you're going to play with this high value contrast, and then high contrast in kind of the color temperature as well.
Yeah.
And so it's a very bright and in your face kind of colored comic, but because it's noir, the lighting still, you notice that a lot of the backgrounds are just completely blacked out. Like there's a lot of like Magnolia kind of reference in there, and kind of some Frank Miller.
That falling panel too on the right is great, where it's just a blank, like they left no panel border in that. That's great. Just on the to me also, like, one thing that's really striking is they don't rule out their panel borders. Yeah. And that's a fairly at least to me, that's not something I see as often. It might be because I don't read a lot of image recently, but I think that's kind of a cool thing, because it does bring out the color a lot, not having that panel border edge.
Yeah, it's pretty cool the way that they do it. And you don't see a lot of panel borders. You will see kind of that solid color, but then occasionally they'll do something like this, or we don't have panel borders here, but they've got kind of the color stopping short, and so it looks like, the conversation is kind of breaking out.
I adore it. That's cool.
So anyway, he gets a phone call, and this phone call is pretty jarbled, and somebody is mumbling things, but it seems to be kind of like breaking up a little bit. So he doesn't get the entire conversation, and then he gets in a fight with the fishmen, and he's thrown into the street and almost run over by a Day of the Dead parade. And so you'll kind of see in this panel that they're playing these two, I feel like, really like these blacks are kind of washed out at this point.
Yeah.
But they're playing these two kind of as bookends of this thing. Like, he's on the ground looking up, and these just giant, kind of surreal figures are like towering over him.
Yeah.
Coming after him. And then eventually he runs off, and we see him run off, and here's again, him running, borderless panel.
Nice.
And he ends up
highlight that he's wearing Chucks. Sorry, that's very important detail.
It is. And for whatever reason, his hands are constantly taped up like a Street Fighter. Like, he just kind of reminds me of like Ryu.
I love it.
A lot of those situations. But then we see like the camera angle changes, and they become significantly less threatening.
Yeah.
And then it just turns into kind of like, a little parade, and he's walking away from it, and we see that kind of hinted at throughout, as we see like confetti.
Yeah.
Anyway, pretty genius kind of how they change the tone of things so quickly.
Yeah, I even was just noticing the subtlety of like having the confetti fall on that page is from, top to bottom, to kind of flow through the panels is kind of brilliant too. It's just,
you kind of see it flow here.
That's so amazing. Wow. That's really cool.
And that's something that is, the way they flow through panels is brilliant. I'll show you a page that it should make no sense.
Okay.
But it's so brilliantly done that even though you're not going top to bottom, left to right, you're just like wandering around everywhere. They lead your eye exactly where they want you to go. It's pretty incredible. And then I love stuff like this. So he's kind of like giving us he's monologuing, because it's a hard-boiled detective story. And he's talking about how he has no memory and he doesn't know anything. When we get over here and we actually we see this fish, and you see that the lens turns into a fisheye lens.
Yeah.
But then you see the fish get eaten by some creature that comes up from the bottom. And so we're actually we change perspective going from top down kind of narrator to bottom up. And that becomes really important later as you see that a lot of the manipulation that are happening to these main characters are from the beyond, the world that they call the world beneath the sea. And you've got different gods from different pantheons, like Dagon, the fish god, and
awesome.
Different characters that are kind of involved. And so it's an interesting camera shift to kind of tilt camera from a high angle to a low angle, and then turn it fisheye, and then destroy the fish.
It's also just kind of a cool idea of a shot of a dead fish from a fisheye perspective, where it's you're almost like the fish. That's really cool. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so
really beautifully done. Jim in the chats is saying, here, I'll pull up some of the chats to share them. So Gary was saying, I'm really enjoying the look of it, particularly the colors. Yeah. Let's see. Jim Lujan was saying this looks fantastic. And then Gary was saying he also noticed none of the panels having borders. And then Chris Kawagua said these are great looking colors. So I think this is a pretty awesome looking book so far, Cory.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And you'll notice that a lot of the, even though they're changing scenes, a lot of the characters kind of take their colors with them, even though they feel like they still belong in the scene. And so she is very typically green. He is very typically blue. But then we'll even cut over to some silhouettes, and you still get a little bit of rim lighting.
I love it. I'm also noticing, I'm a little impressed by this because sometimes in comics, when I see a lot of just blank color panels with just a figure, it feels like a cop out,
Right.
But the way they're doing it here is so stylistic that it doesn't feel like floating heads or just singular characters on a solid background. It's very really well designed. I'm really very impressed by this book because technically in theory, I would think that shouldn't work,
Right.
But it does. That's really cool. Wow.
Yeah, and the cool thing is it's not like the artist can't draw backgrounds.
For sure.
He does, he nails it. I really think it's just a really important stylistic choice. As you go through, you see the color palette change as her mood changes.
That's so cool.
It starts very blue, and it starts to transition to a red, and then really the only point of white, because this is all kind of like a washed out blue or purple, is the whites of her eyes as she sees this goat be basically sacrificed to the television and just enveloped in the TV.
Yeah, dude, the colorist is winning the day on this book. I love the art, I love the inks, but this colorist is just on fire. I can't believe it.
Well, they're all the same guy. He's just amazing.
Wow.
And he went on to do some Star Wars books after this. So there's Darth Vader scenes that are kind of colored in a very similar way.
That's so amazing.
Anyway, so this is Bridget telling him why she's in trouble. And there's this kind of theme of masks that are kind of throughout. So we've got the villain is masked. We've got the heroine or the client is masked. And then there's all these masks on the walls. And later, as we get into kind of the theme of things, you'll see kind of why I think that is.
I love it.
So I'll just kind of speed past because this is a whole trade paperback. So I'll just flip through. So he goes and he starts recording, the thumb and his enterprise, and it looks like the thumb is drug running with the fishmen. So the fishmen are kind of the delivery system. He catches this he records it on a giant VHS recorder. The thumb's a pretty evil dude. He sacrifices one of his guys as payment to kind of breaks his neck there and sacrifices one of his guys to the fishmen so that they can eat him.
Sorry, that giant crack, like in like a condensed sans serif is just, that's great for a sound effect.
Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
And the fact that we don't need to see all of the letters and everything, it really works really well. So,
jeez.
And I love this. Because what we're doing is we see the thumb kind of walk off into this almost cosmic doorway. We don't exactly what's going on. We have kind of this vignette. Then that mirrors the fishmen kind of taking their prize, off into the swamp, into this kind of glowing area. And then we see we're back with the thumb, and we see that, and we cut back. So we're like juxtaposing these two, the fishman and the thumb. And then we see Bridget, no entry, which is probably very, symbolic of, there's always a little bit of kind of a love interest situation. And I think that's kind of very clear. And then we see the no entry hallway open, and there's just a rooster ominously staring.
That's so cool.
And so you kind of get this, this kind of like juxtaposition and Z pattern on these pages. Anyway, it's phenomenal. I love the way that they're doing it. And then they end each issue with TV static.
Oh, I love it. Okay.
So, and then we see the teleshaman in like this library full of VHS tapes.
Oh,
here's the rooster.
So this is a valuable question too. Is this a continuing series, or this is the full collected series?
So this one trade paperback is the entire story, though both Caspar and Dan have hinted at there being a number 2 at some point in time. But it's been 5 years, and they just started. They both went off to do some big 2 books, and they just got back together to do Homesick Pilots.
Okay.
Which is a very similar looking story, but it's set in the 90s instead of in the 80s.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's keep going. This is looking great, though, man. And by the way, Kayla was saying, I'm just sketching and listening, but this is super interesting. I'm excited to start reading comics. And I feel the same way. Like, this new format and this show, I think, is also an excuse for Cory and I to sort of force like we were joking when starting this is going to be a great way for us to force ourselves to kind of reintroduce ourselves to comics that we love. And also, as a cartoonist and as animators and cartoonists, we can kind of lose touch with the very things that we love. And so this is a really great way for us to explore. And holy crap, look at that page.
I was slowly waiting for you to finish. So in the second issue, he gets so the first issue is Clay versus the Thumb, and the second issue is Clay versus the Teleshaman.
I love it.
So the Teleshaman, and what I love about him is his character design is both Native American and samurai and 1983 kind of ring and stick bunny ears antenna. And just this silhouette. I mean, he's got kind of the shoulder pads, but not really. I mean, it looks very samurai. Anyway, so he gets pulled into the TV, and this is where things get really weird.
Oh, it went black. I don't know what happened with the screen.
Why did it go black?
I don't know.
Let's see if we can get
there we go. We're back.
All right, let me see if I can. I'll rig this better next time, but
yeah. You guys bear with us too. We're just starting, so we're gonna get the technical stuff all down. But I think this is working very well. Okay, so by the way, also gotta just mention like these characters, like the villain names are just classic. Like the Thumb is a great villain name for a bad guy, and the Teleshaman is a pretty great one too. So I'm digging that too. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's so good. So I'm trying to decide, Josh, at this point in time, how much plot do we do? Because I don't want to spoil it necessarily. Should I just skip the end, or should I just kind of gloss over some stuff? Or
I think I would just highlight some key elements, because I think you gave people a taste of it. So it definitely. Oh, one other question: the voice in it. Like you were talking about it, kind of having this hard-boiled detective vibe to it. Is his speech kind of hard-boiled detective-ish too, like the way he's narrating? Is it first person or?
I would, yeah. I don't think Yeah, I mean, I think he is the narrator most of the time.
Okay. So
Yeah,
I think we got a good view of it. So maybe just highlight some of the pages, because it's definitely like, to me, that's enough to be intrigued and just to be blown away by the art. And I can definitely see, why it's appealing to you. Although, like, once again, so maybe just highlight some pages, and then we can get into kind of what we took away from it and the style and the art, that kind of thing.
So for the most part here, he gets sucked into the TV, and this is a really interesting experience because he starts out on a kind of like a game show, and then they kind of have the banter, and I love that she's got the 80s haircut and that. But then this is where I really feel like Caspar starts to just really show off, and so he starts to get attacked by like Betty Boop style characters, and then he's fighting the teleshaman, and then they have this kind of throwdown conversation, and you can see that the thumb is able to see what's going on in the TV, and the teleshaman is able to spy on everybody. He's kind of got these big brother abilities, and so anything that anybody screen in their home, he can spy on them. And then we've got Papa Legba who's being summoned here. But this is where I wanted to show everybody this. This is the craziest page, and you'd think you'd go this way, but then you start actually following him.
Oh, dude, that's so cool.
As he leads you, all the way through this, and then off camera, the teleshaman shows up as Max Headroom and is like threatening him, and the lettering here is great because it is pixelated lettering.
I love it. I love that spread. Oh my gosh, I want to steal that. Which we'll get into. By the way, you guys, we're both creatives too. Like Cory and I both create comics and illustration and animation and all sorts of stuff. So another purpose of this show is like a spread like that gives me so many ideas.
Right.
So it's also like looking at stuff that we can borrow, right? Or get inspired by. And to me, that's just brilliant. Wow, this is cool.
Right. So then his buddy shows up and she realizes what's going on. So Sandy is like, hold on just a second. So she plugs an old Nintendo into the TV and starts controlling the characters in a Street Fighter style fight. And she puts in the Konami code, which gives him a bunch of extra lives. And then he grabs the remote and he fast forwards this guy to death.
Wow.
So anyway,
that is so surreal and just fun.
Yeah, and then he ejects himself from the TV and he crawls out of the VCR.
I am really impressed by that. That just also just the level of play, like it's sophisticated the way it's being executed, and then when you see that level of play with the paneling, you can definitely tell, like, at least at the layout stage, he must have been having a lot of fun with that.
Right.
That's amazing. Wow, Cory, you've picked a good one here.
Yeah. So then he gets attacked by basically, like, I don't know, a brass band of the dead that is able to hypnotize everybody into vomiting snakes at him.
Wow.
And so they escape. They end up in like a warehouse full of mannequins, just because, now we're moving more away from hard-boiled into like horror. The mannequins are taken over by snakes. They fight them. She puts a curse or hex or spell on this He-Man type figure.
I like that panel sequence too with the lipstick. I mean, that's really smart to do those long, thin panels. Yeah. I'm gonna have to get this book, Cory. This was one of my fears about this show, was that it'll make us broke. I'm gonna have to buy this book.
Yeah, so I'll skip forward a little bit. He's captured. He has to fight the thumbs, alligators, and this is where we revert back to the kind of lizard on a stick motif that we had before. Because now he's got a spear fighting a giant mutated alligator.
Wow.
And then we kind of move into the 60s a little bit, in the 70s.
Huh.
She's trying to figure out how to reconnect with the voodoo gods. We'll keep going. I love that they're doing, I don't know how well you can see this, but I love that they're doing, you can't really tell.
Yeah, I can see that there's like banded lines of like a TV screen. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So there's some of that going on, and he's tied up with Memorex, and things like that. So then Bridget shows up. I don't want to spoil anything with her, but she is, not surprisingly, more than she seems. And I love this whole page because
that's so brilliant.
We get in the car with this character, and then we start to see fast forward lines, and the car isn't affected by it, but the background is. And then all of a sudden we have kind of the holding pattern symbol as the perspective of the car starts to drive out of 2D into 3D.
Wow.
So there's some of that. I'll kind of skip that. I don't want to ruin that for anybody. So then they end up in the land beneath the sea, which is the land of the dead, but it's a mixed pantheon land of the dead. So we have some Greek. We've got some. Who's Dagon? Is that?
Sorry. Give me 2 seconds. There's a couple people. What was it? Oh yeah. So Scott was saying, I thought I used a lot of panels on a page, and then Gary was saying he just dropped it in his Amazon cart.
Yes. Oh, yeah. By the way, if you guys want to support the show and are interested in the books that we're talking about, go to irsagency.com and click on the book on that page, because it doesn't cost you any more, but it'll give us a little bit of a kickback, which kind of helps pay for some of the equipment and subscriptions that we have to do this show.
Nice. And I guess Gary's reasoning was that the same thing. Josh put it well. The sense of play is really attractive in it. And I agree. I'm stunned by the playfulness of the storytelling, the sort of fun with it's almost like hard-boiled, bad guys, but with this sort of digital. I mean, you did a really good job summarizing this plot. And I can see why it was a little tough to summarize, because holy moly, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that TV screens in a cutaway of like a tree?
Okay, so this is the god Dagon, who's the fish god of the Mesopotamians.
Yeah, isn't that like an H.P. Lovecraft character?
Well, he's also in the Old Testament.
I love it.
He was an actual Mesopotamian god. The Old Testament, there was Baal and Dagon and a couple other false gods kind of in that narrative.
And then this TV screen mouth is just insanely cool.
Yeah. And so so this is where we start to get into some of the meaning. Some of these are kind of tip the hat, but not in a super obvious way. So we have stuff like this where omniscient Dagon sees through the translucent liquid of time. He can see what does not belong. He can see between the levels. Ouroboros Dagon sees the jagged joint where the cycle begins anew. And so you start to see this theme that's kind of going on. And then
like Scott was saying Lovecraft. Sorry, go ahead.
So it starts to get very metaphysical, and it starts to get very existential. And then he says, compatible Dagon supports both VHS and Betamax. It's phenomenal. So you have Sandy's ancestors represented as spider creatures that are waiting to be resurrected. And then we jump over to Clay being eaten by this half TV, half Lovecraftian monster.
Wow.
And then we cut back and forth between those situations as they're burrowing in her ear. And it has switched completely away from detective hard-boiled into full on horror at this point in time. But the cool thing about it is what they start to do is they start to talk about what's going on. So she starts to have, she starts to have this conversation with Death, who is the Baron Saturday, and he offers to play a game of chess with her, and she says, no, it's a little bit on the nose. But all the chess pieces are characters that we've seen so far in the story, and so we start to see that he's actually been kind of manipulating things behind the scenes.
Oh, that's so awesome.
And then these two panels are some of my favorite panels.
I'm sorry, is she like glitching out in that top left? Like
okay, yeah. So
that's a cool effect. I want to borrow that.
Yeah, for this entire issue, she is either melting or glitching based on what's going on. And so when she's being attacked, she starts to melt and drift. But when she's not, when she's more in control, her form is solid but broken on the inside.
Oh, that's so cool. I can't believe I'm just picking that up, but that's amazing. And that's a cool story device. And I think, well, I mean, Cory, I like melting people. I draw them all the time. So that's kind of a cool, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and the reason that that's happening is that she is a living person in the land of the dead. And
I love it.
She's almost being projected in there, but she doesn't really belong. And so her form is shifting. And in this issue of this series, they play with motion like I've never seen. It's a phenomenal use of motion.
I love it.
So then the He-Man character shows up, riding a lizard. Again, we have kind of the lizard, but in the land of the dead, the lizards aren't on the stick. They are very mobile and vicious and whatnot. And then Death says, enough, you irritate me, little homunculus. What is your message? And so she comes with a message from Death's wife. And you can see that Sandy starts to progressively not be able to contain herself until she's completely solid, with a little bit of a bleed into this panel until she's come in. So it's almost like being teleported.
See, I love this kind of paneling because I think a lot of the times when people try to do dynamic paneling, they'll think in terms of like the McFarlane kind of panel, which is kind of crazy. Some of the paneling he used to do in like Spawn,
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, it doesn't have to be like all circles and like flowy and crazy. Like you can do crazy complicated things with like a simple grid, because I love that. Like that's one thing that's really impressed me about this so far too, is like how much they're taking a basic grid and then just kind of like just doing things like having that flow into the other panel and having this interplay of paneling. It's really cool. And I think just a really a different way of doing dynamic paneling that I think can really work. I mean, wow. Geez, just unbelievable work.
Yeah. It is. I mean, I think you could study this comic for hours and hours and hours and continue to get stuff out of it.
Wow.
So we show back up to the land of the living. Sandy finds a fishman in her car. She's possessed by Death at this point in time, and Bridget is playing chess, except the chess pieces are normal. And there's a lot to that, but I don't want to ruin anything for anybody. And so then you just kind of see. I'll just flip through some of these without commentary because I don't want to give up the ending. But
I also love the whole El Mariachi style guitar case being used all the time. That makes me happy.
Yeah. He's always bringing something in his guitar case. So he's got gasoline or a VHS camera or a bat. There's never a guitar in there though. And so you kind of see, there's a bit of a showdown at the end. There's all the TVs. I love this because Sandy is being possessed by Death. And we see that in the shadow, Death is pulling the strings, just, and you kind of get that kind of almost a puppet-like situation. And even though the character design is the same, I feel like the way that she is walking is very masculine compared to the way that she was walking before.
Got it. And also a little stiffer. That's interesting. I like it.
So you have kind of marionette and male, even though she still looks very female, but now she is arms out, upright, chest back, and it's like watching an actor in a movie, play a different part, and they're really good at it, except it's the artist that's doing it, and it's just phenomenal.
Oh, I love that last panel too on the right. That's just beautiful color. The color in this book alone makes me want to pick it up. I love it.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So anyway, so we kind of see different things, and I love stuff like this when they're going through. We see Sandy, and Sandy is wearing the He-Man homunculus's head, who continues to talk to people in kind of like a Conan the Barbarian style language.
So great.
Time, like every time he's on screen, he's talking in like a very chivalrous, type of old school language. So anyway, you kind of see things carry on, and they go and whatnot, and then at the end, we see the conversation between these two, and they talk about what's going on, and you start to see the juxtaposition of the meaning of the story. And so if I were to get into the meaning of the story, it's very existential, which is very interesting to me. So I haven't given away kind of the last bit, but I wanted to read a few. I wanted to read a few of the quotes that I took that kind of go into the one of the things. So I'm gonna come over here. Let's see, what's the best way to do this? I'll show you some of the art as I'm doing some of this in the back. So we've got some. Oh, and we have a Matto the Warrior and the Eldritch Abominations mini comic in the back of this trade.
I also can you just show that just for a second? That ad is amazing. That is so great.
And it's like this kid with kind of a Lion-O lightsaber. It's very 80s. I mean, you've got the Mattel knockoff logo down here. You've got the Masters of the Universe knockoff logo here.
Oh,
that he was riding that's armored just like Battle Cat.
That's so cool.
I love that this kid has just super messed up teeth. It's just great. Lightning everywhere in the 80s, kind of glowing neon grid.
I also just love the idea of fake ads in comics. I want to see more of that. And I think, it must be something ingrained in us from when I was a kid and I'd read Mad Magazine, and you'd see these fake ads. There's just something whenever I see an ad used for narrative, it makes me happy.
Yeah.
It's also kind of punk rock because you're repurposing advertising for your own benefit, not for a product. And I love that.
Yeah, I agree.
Wow.
So,
okay. So let's real quick, just because we just went through that again and I have a bad memory. Who's the artist again and what's the name? Just everybody peeked through that whole thing. Let's hear the name of the artist in the book again.
So Caspar Wijngaard and Dan Waters.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What an amazing book. And that's called Limbo.
Yeah. Ooh. And there's a really good interview with the both of them and the guy who does Strip Panel Naked on YouTube. It's three and they talk about their interaction, and it's pretty interesting to see how both of them are very active in the visuals and the writing.
I love it.
And so, they showed that page that we did with the page with the teleshaman. They showed the script on that, and it was written out. You could see, let's see, where is that page? But you could see kind of the boxes and everything that they did. And so what Dan did is, where is it? It's right here. So what Dan did is he actually gridded it out, and then just put solid boxes with text, Army, Western, into a shootout, into anime, into a football game, into whatever. And then Caspar came in and kind of fleshed it out. And he actually drew all of the clay characters first on different layers in Photoshop, and then was able to kind of just move them around in placement, and then try to figure out how to get them from from one scene to the next. You see him like climbing up the sewer grate here into a ladder.
Yeah, I mean, that is just, and even, where he's stepping on the helicopter. I mean, that's so clever. Yeah, that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
That I'd say that spread alone, that's about the point where I was like, I have to buy this book.
So if you also feel like you have to buy this book, then go to irsagency.com and click on the link there, because it gives us an affiliate link. So I really want to talk about the meaning. I want to talk about the meaning of this because the meaning is really fascinating. So I'll just read a couple quotes. So this is Bridget explaining something. She says, each screen creates the next. And she takes the camera, and I don't know where it is in the book. I'll get better at this. But she takes the camera at some point and points it at the TV. So you get that kind of infinite TV situation, where it like kind of steps down.
Yeah.
And she says, each screen creates the next, influences its shape. Each is a symbol in a chain, just like the thoughts in your head, that looping network of input and difference that becomes so complex that it turns on itself, creating the most complex symbol of all, the I in the human mind. And so we start to see that we're talking about kind of true existentialism, which is like, who am I in this world? Would I be different if I was born a second later, or if I, all that type of stuff? What if we remove the points of reference, all those memories, dreams, and symbols, those symbols, does the I still exist? Is it still in the same mind? Is it doomed to follow the same pathways down to the same end? And so what you really start to see is that this character, Clay, shows up with no memory, basically as a social experiment to see if he will be the same type of person that he was before he lost his memory. And there's this giant chess game that's happening between these two anthropomorphized versions of death that are like organizing everything to do this social experiment to see, is it nature or nurture? Is it in his nature to be evil? If we take away all of his memories of his evil acts before this, will he be good? And then you kind of see this. And then Death at the end says, I'll wager that it takes no more than a whisper in his ear to revert this man back to his old ways. The living, they ain't got the change in them. I tell you, they're predictable. And so you have these two characters that are debating whether or not it's possible for man to change.
Oh, that's awesome. So it's like free will versus predestination. How heavy. That's awesome.
So it takes place in this super fun, crazy thing, but actually if you're really looking at the writing in between, like the in between all the dialogue and everything, it really is kind of a a situation where, I don't know if you've read the what's the series of movies where they do all the camera shaking, and the guy's an amnesiac. It's a spy movie. Something Identity. The Bourne Identity.
Yeah.
It's a very similar thing to The Bourne Identity, where throughout the book, not the movie, because the movie is very loosely based on the book.
Got it.
The book, he wakes up an amnesiac, and then he continues to reveal layer upon layer about himself. And he thinks he's evil, or he thinks he's good, or he thinks he's evil, or he thinks he's good. He flops back and forth. And the same thing happens to Clay here as he slowly peels back he's solving these little mysteries as a PI. But as he's doing that, he keeps getting glimpses into his past and trying to decide whether he was an evil person or whether he was a good person and what that means to him now. And a big tenet of existential theory is that facts exist, but we get to ascribe value to those facts. And so the things that we've done in the past and the things that have happened to us in the past, we can't change those, but we get to put value to them or not. And so as he reveals that he is actually a pretty bad person prior to waking up 9 months ago, not knowing anything what's going on, he still gets to decide whether he goes this way or that. And so anyway, and then also on top of that, there's the Thumb has this monologue where he goes through and he talks about how the detective is insane in all the stories. He's like, the detective is insane.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about this, but he's talking about hard-boiled detectives. He's like, you have this person who sits alone in his office, a client comes, because that happens, the detective chases all these leads, gets beat up, gets physically harmed, risks death, and then at the end wins nothing and sits in his office and waits for the next client. He says the detective in hard-boiled stories is the modern day Sisyphus. And so then we realize that Clay is both this kind of like avatar for the self, our perception of who we are, and a modern day version of Sisyphus who is trying to continue to do this thing over and over again. And at the end of this story, you see at the very end, they
like reset.
Yeah, so it goes like this, and they go here, and they go here, they go to fuzz, they go to stop, and they go to rewind.
Oh, that's so smart. So it is literally, I mean, that is Sisyphus, because it's like having to repeat, or maybe possibly like a more modern version would be like Groundhog Day. Gary was asking, I think we answered that. Is Limbo just a title, or does it explain a bit of what's going on in this? And I'm guessing this is pretty much like after this man's passed away, and now he's kind of being sort of like a chess piece in this bid between whether man will have the ability to change with free will, or whether they'll repeat their same mistakes, like no matter what the inputs. And that's that. I mean, so mind blowing, man.
You're right, except he's alive, and so I guess this will explain part of it. But what we find out about midway through the story is that this is all taking place in Clay's mind, and he is in a coma. And the only thing that's keeping the doctors from unplugging him is that he continues to move his index finger.
Oh, okay.
And so he should be dead, but Death and Death's wife decide to play a game with him based on his memories. So they take his memories away and build a world out of his context. And so that's why everything is built out of 80s tech.
Dude, that's amazing. Okay, cool. Should we talk now about what sort of, I mean, I think we touched on a few things, but inspiration, how does this, should we cut back from the book or show the book still?
Yeah. I'll come back over here and go black and white.
Oh, yeah. We're sticking to black and white when we're showing ourselves, and then what we do. But so yeah, Cory, that was mind blowing and really cool. It makes me happy we're doing this, and I only hope I do as good of a job on next week's book, because that was very fascinating and compelling, and definitely makes me want to get the book. So great job, kind of like summarizing it and stuff. So you definitely recommend the book, right?
Highly recommended.
Okay. Yeah. Now let's get into
highly recommended with a caveat.
Yeah.
There's some implied nudity, and there is a lot of cursing. And so depending on your level of comfort with some of those elements.
Yeah, this definitely probably isn't like a book to go get your kid. You know?
I wouldn't. Yeah. So and everybody, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has different levels of comfort with different types of content, but so the cursing's pretty rated R. They drop the F-bomb quite a bit.
Okay.
I highly recommend it for a number of reasons. If I'm talking about what I'm going to steal, and I mean why I picked this as the first book that I wanted to talk about because of the influences. I think the content of it, if you look at a lot of the work that I do, I mean, I'm wearing it right now. You've got where are we? There we go. I love the mixture of kind of retro technology and nature and kind of the weirdness of kind of the older tech. I just love that it's just clunky rectangles of plastic and those type of things. And we were just trying so hard to be cutting edge. And there's some sort of kind of nostalgia to the big clunkiness of it. And I love the idea of like old school televisions having fake plastic wood grain, on the paneling and stuff like that, because it's just like, there's nothing about that looks natural.
Yeah, totally.
so I love all that, and the storytelling devices. If anybody's read any of my comics, of which there are few, the storytelling devices of using the rewind and the fast forward and the screens as actually characters in the story. I mean, it's kind of like Gotham is a character in a Batman comic.
Yeah.
Even though it's just the city, like the idea of the media is a character in this comic. It's a very interesting thing to me to see like concepts being personified.
Yeah, totally.
And so there's some of that. And then I also just love, if you'll notice, a lot of the way that I color is very high saturation and very color temperature contrasting. And even to the point where I will go in and I'll do like a radial gradient with very low opacity. Like I usually do like 20% opacity and a radial gradient, just to like give it a little burst of opposing color, so that even in my shadows, it'll shift between like a warm and a cool.
I totally see that. Yeah. I could definitely see the influence of the color from this on your work, because it's playing with like highly saturated, but also like a lot of complementary and a lot of gradient washes kind of overlaid over color. It's really cool to see that in your work. That is really inspiring too.
And then the last thing that I think I'd steal or be inspired by is I like that it deals with some kind of intellectual, heady concepts.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't beat you over the head with it. And if you miss those concepts, you can still enjoy the comic.
Yeah.
Because I like to do some underlying meaning in some of the stuff that I'm doing. I like to have some of that, but I don't want it to ruin the enjoyment of the thing. And so like if you read Limbo and you don't get like, oh, there's Kierkegaard and there's, Sartre and there's all these guys, and you're not getting like, existential philosophy out of it. It's still a really fun comic.
Yeah.
And you can kind of let your eyes glaze over when the teleshaman starts wandering around talking about whatever, or death starts, meandering around. And in the way that it's written in the dialogue, there's meaning beneath the words, but if the meaning goes over your head, you still get the vibe of that character.
Yeah.
So I love the subtlety of some of the deeper waters that they kind of wade in.
I love it. In the chats, Kayla was asking, totally off topic, but Kerr, that is a really cool shirt. Where is that from?
This is the only one of these that exists. So this is my artwork on a shirt. I was testing it out, and I don't know. I'm not sure that I really like it. I haven't decided to sell it. But it's an overprint. So I tried something and it kind of did that.
I love all over prints on a technical note, and I think that one works on you. I've tried to pull off all over prints and I can't. They look terrible on me. Okay, cool. Well, I think that was really fascinating and cool, and I kind of feel like to wrap it, maybe we should tease. Is there anything we didn't touch on that book?
Well, I did a lot of talking because I want to get your thoughts. And so is there anything based on what you saw that you would steal? Anything that
For me, the main thing is that'll be applicable since I'm still thumbnailing like the second book for 2 stories. I'm always keeping an eye out for different paneling tricks that I might be able to use. And there's like at least 10 I saw while you were thumbing through, particularly that walking through the panel sequence, which is really cool. And I've always been looking for something similar to that. I never thought of having them walk outside of the borders. I've seen Frank King do that with like a large landscape of like a forest or something where a character will walk through it. But that was just a really cool, interesting kind of technique that I might have to kind of draw some influence from. And then definitely for just just design, layout, and color. I mean, and then of course, I mean, it looks beautifully drawn too. So I think there's a lot to be pulled from that, and I definitely will be picking up a copy because it's just, I mean, just that spread alone, that one spread where they're walking through the, I think it's like 12 panels or 20 panels, something like that. 3, 6, 9, I think it was 18 panels actually. But anyhow, where they're walking through that whole sequence, it's like that just that alone makes me want to get that book just for that spread. And then the story as well sounds really fascinating and cool, and kind of cyberpunky, but with like more of a philosophical bent, and more grounded in kind of this almost like Day of the Dead sort of vibe. It's unique, so it definitely makes me want to get it. But yeah, for me, like the main thing that sticks out, the main thing I will probably borrow from this book is the paneling, because there's just things they're doing with paneling that's very sophisticated and definitely my speed, because I like working with a simple grid and then you break the grid in these weird ways rather than trying like some crazy page layout. Like you can just widen a frame or have like something flow from the panel to another. So yeah, it was a really inspiring, and I definitely this was a good one to kick it off with, because I definitely think I'll borrow that. It also makes me a little nervous about my next week's book, because it's a totally different vibe, but I think it'll be good.
Oh, I think that's going to be good, because I will be switching vibes as well. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Real quick though, let me share my screen. Go share screen and go to this one. So if you guys go to irsagency.com, it'll take you to this page, and this page kind of explains what's happening. You'll see whatever the next issue is going to be, issue, whatever we're calling these. And the way that this is going to work for those of you that are watching now,
we're the IRS, and that's what we're doing. We're auditing books.
The next audit. Yes, I love it. But what you'll see is we want to hear from you guys. And so anybody who is watching this or is interested in participating, we have an email address, and if you look up here, email us at this address right here, and you'll see it in the description.
Yeah.
Give us an MP3 file or a link to a video. Try to keep your thoughts to like 60 to 90 seconds. I'd love to hear if you liked it, if you hated it, if there's a takeaway, if you are creative, because this show is for consumers and creators. What you would steal from it. I'd love to hear what you're planning, what inspired you about it. Or if you've just got some suggestions of books that we should take a look at, we'd love to get new books. And you can check that out. And then as you scroll down here, if I convinced you today to buy this book, click on the link here, and the book will cost the same amount as it would normally, but Amazon kicks us back just a couple of percentage points. And so there's that. And Josh, why don't you tell us next up on the schedule, Monday, February 15th?
Sure. Yeah. I have it on my cam, and I'm going to have to set it up as nicely as Cory's, but this is Further Grickle. It's a book by Graham Annabelle, who was actually the director of the Box Trolls movie. But before Box Trolls ever was in existence, back when he used to work at Lucasfilm, he also used to publish these indie comics through Alternative Comics, and they're brilliant. So it's a totally different style. It'll be a stylistic shift from last week, where it's black and white interiors, and very cartoony, and might even be a different direction than people would expect me to pull up for like something that influenced me. But I think it'll be really inspiring and cool. And I also, let me go back to our page here that you had. I also want to encourage people to check out this. I was trying to get that fancy thing and I can't. Okay. So I would encourage people, there it is. I would encourage people to try to get, read along with us too. So like, if you're kind of curious to follow along with the books we're doing, And like Cory was saying, you can send in a little snippet. So like if you happen to read this book or one of the books we have like lined up in the future, you could also participate by throwing in your thoughts as well. But I do think it'll be cool. I think Graham Annabelle will be a really important one to cover too, because he's a guy who, especially a lot of animators, look to for movement and beats and pacing, because he'll take like a stick figure and sort of do it in such a sophisticated way at the movements of that figure that it's just unique to him as an artist. And it's one of those things that makes artists who know how to draw like really jealous, because what he's doing is very hard and complicated and he makes it look easy. So yeah. So that's what we got lined up for next week. And there's a particular story, because it's a collection of different stories. There's a particular story in that the themes and the art and the style have been a massive influence on the creation of two stories, weirdly enough, from that. So I think that'll be exciting.
I think I'm starting to see a pattern emerge. I think you're going to bring the intellectual, and I'm going to bring the weird.
And I will say Grickle gets pretty weird. There's the story in particular that influenced me is like a very strange, odd story about a neighbor's dog and potential grave burial. So come back and join us next week. And like another thing too, eventually we also will be having occasional guests on to also review their books and their influences as well. And really, this show is going to be built by you guys, who we are going to call our IRS agents. And so if you're an IRS agent and you're going to join our indie review show, IRS, IRS agency is the hub, and that'll give you all the information you guys need to know.
And there's also an email list to subscribe to on that page if you want to be part of that and everything. So we are going the way this is going to work, at least for the next little while until we kind of figure this out, is we're going to stream on my YouTube channel when I'm presenting and Josh's YouTube channel when he's presenting, and then we're going to take those videos down and we will put them up on the IRS Agency YouTube channel. All that information you can find on the irsagency.com. But we are also streaming to Twitch. And so if anybody's interested in jumping over to Twitch, we're doing that as well. So
I love it.
Hey, should we do quick plugs at the end here just in case?
Yeah, that works. So thanks to everybody who tuned in. Again, go to Joshua Kemble, quarterlystories.com. And while you're at it, after you've picked up this beautiful copy of Limbo, please consider getting this book. Boom, 2 stories. It's a comic about faith and mental illness. It's hand lettered and hand inked. It's an autobiographical story that gets pretty deep and very existential. So if you guys are interested in the existential stuff we talked about, this will probably be your cup of tea as well. So that would be something to consider. And Cory, what can everybody check out? Where can they check out your animations? Where can they also see like the one you're building with Jim Lujan and other animations as well?
Yeah, so if you go to CoryKerr.com, everything is there. And if you go to CoryKerr.com/online, you can watch the most recent episode of Endo Exo, which is the current animation I'm working on. And you can follow me on YouTube, where Jim Lujan and I are collaborating on Breaking the Chains, which is the behind the scenes series of us collaborating for an animation that he is writing and doing the art for, and I'm doing the animation for. So you can check those out. And I would recommend checking out the comic that I wrote that was in the anthology. Heavily inspired by this type of stuff, because there's a lot of like mixing of old literature characters from Moby Dick with like ancient Japanese and European and different pantheons and gods and stuff in this seafaring tale with some Lovecraftian kind of overtones and stuff. And it's only 4 pages long, so it's nothing like, and it's all black and white. So it's nothing like that, but it does have some kind of similar themes. But you can read it for free if you click on the blog section of my website.
I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, cool. Gary said off to a great start, guys. Thank you, Gary. Thanks. You guys are the early IRS agents. So everybody in the chats, we will remember you. And then also Circworks said, love the show. Thanks, Scott. We love you too. And then I think that'll pretty much wrap it. So I'm trying to think of like a cool catchphrase we can end it with. And I'm almost feeling like, all right, IRS agents, we'll see you in our next audit.
We really need music during this thing.
Yeah. We'll have to cut that in, I think.
Yeah, that's good. We'll do that with our team of people behind the scenes that we don't have.
I love it.
All right. We'll catch you guys next week when Josh is presenting his. Go to irsagency.com and follow along.